At one point in my life, I could never understand why people would act the way they did. Uh, you know, for example, if I'm staying in an area, let's say, and kind of unfamiliar with the place, and I come across somebody who is familiar, maybe a neighbor or maybe, just a local, and they just didn't treat me fairly, They just didn't give me the time of day, they didn't smile. And of course, as somebody who's new to the area, I'm trying to make friends, trying to become closer with people, trying to be nice to to everybody, and trying to be nice to everybody else who I'm interacting with. And they would just not give me the time of day. And for the longest time, I would just immediately become offended, How could they do that? That's so rude. God, that's so mean. And it wasn't until I read this PDF called The Art of Not Being Offended. You can look it up. It's like a one-page PDF. And pretty much what it says is that everybody reacts based on their traumas. So when you go out in the world and you interact with people, they are going to interact with you or react to how you act based on whatever traumas they grew up with, based on whatever traumas they had as a kid, based on how their parents treated them, based on where they grew up, like everything, the place they grew up, how they grew up, the time of year they grew up, whatever it is, or the time of decade, I should say. And so when you learn that fact, everything changes, because now, instead of you getting offended, you can actually more or less just recognize that people are different from you. People did not grow up in the same way that you did, and because of that, they're going to act differently. And if they haven't spent time working on themselves to become better people also, then they're also going to, react maybe poorly. Maybe they're not going to give you the time of day. Maybe they're not going to like the way that you act. Maybe they don't like people that are really friendly and nice. Maybe where they grew up, being friendly and nice meant that you get bullied. And so for me, as somebody who grew up in the very, middle class, upper middle class house, with a family that was loving and kind, and a family that became even more loving and kind after my parents got divorced, because they wanted to make sure that, us kids still knew that we were loved, and try to keep the family together as best as they could. All of that really changed my direction in life. So when I would go out and interact with people, I would be smiley, positive, happy, and very pure, just very much myself. But some people didn't like that. And so it's just something to keep in mind, that it's not anything to do with you, and it's everything to do with them. So the art of not being offended, and in a way, the Buddhists, they hold compassion for those people. This is also a really great Buddhist lesson, which is the Four Noble Truths. The truth of suffering is the first noble truth, and pretty much what it says is that suffering exists in this life, right? So us humans suffer, and we suffer so much in so many different ways, and we suffer because we hold attachment, and that's the second noble truth, of course. We suffer because we hold attachment. So how does that apply to this? Well, don't be offended by people. They're just suffering, and they're suffering because of whatever past experiences they've had. They don't know how to let go of. They don't know how to process that trauma, and that trauma has built a neural network in their brain that leads to reactions, that leads to more suffering, that leads to treating others poorly, and we're not saying that it's right, we're not defending it, but you can just recognize that and say, yeah, that person acted that way just because, they're suffering. That person treated me poorly, or called me a name, or was rude, or didn't smile at me, because they're suffering, and they don't even realize it a lot of times, man. So yeah, as you begin to meditate more and more, I encourage you to meditate on that fact. When we meditate, we don't just meditate only to observe our thoughts, but also we can observe these things that we see in life. Why do people act the way they do? When we can contemplate them. And, in that meditation, contemplation, investigation, we start to ask these questions. Where am I suffering in life? How am I suffering in my own life? Is there things I can do to change that? So I encourage that today. May you be well. May you be free of suffering. Thanks for the video. Well, I guess I made the video for you, but thanks for watching the video. And let's say bye to Radar. Okay, bye.